Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday School. If you would like to follow along with this episode or edition of Monday School, I'd like you all to go to the internet and the Crystal Incense Burner. The Crystal Incense Burner. And Crystal is spelled Qustul. Qustul. Incense burner. Find the crystal incense burner so you can follow along. We're going to talk about one of the most important discoveries in human history, and especially in African history. So I'd like you all to Google or find the crystal incense burner and follow along. So the crystal incense burner was found in Tasseti, Taseti. You should also Google that. Taseti, Tasseti. And that is found in Africa. So the crystal incense burner was discovered in Crystal, Tasseti. Crystal was a capital kingdom of Tasseti. And Tasseti is the first empire in Africa, the first empire that's known to Africans, the Tasseti Empire. So I'm repeating these names because some of you probably have never heard of these names, and I would like you all to become familiar with Tasseti and Coastal. So the Tasseti Empire is the early emergence of civilizations in Africa at least 8,000 BC. At least 8,000 BC. And that's what historians are saying now. That's what archaeologists are saying now. That's what paleoanthropologists are saying now. So research Custal and Tassetti. And Tassetti, just so those of you who don't know, Tassetti is the civilization that evolved to the Cushites or the Nubians. I'm sure you all have heard of the Cushites in the Bible. The Greek, the Jews renamed the Tessetians Cushites, and then the Cushites were later renamed Ethiopians. So, in various versions of the Bible, you'll see that Ethiopians are used instead of Cushites, and Cushites, vice versa, are used instead of Ethiopians. So the Tessetians, they're the ones who became the Cushites or the Nubians. And this is all recorded in the Medineta language. That too has been renamed to the hieroglyphics, the hieroglyphics, the Medineta language. And that's spelled Medineta. You can Google that as well or research it. MDW space NTR. So Medineta is the original sacred language of the Tassetians. They're the ones who wrote the Medineta language that got renamed hieroglyphics during the times of the Greeks in ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet. So again, these are discoveries that have been made by archaeologists and paleoanthropologists. So let's take a look back. Last week we talked about the migration from Southern Africa, from East Africa, from West Africa to Northern Africa because of the drying up of the landscape, global climate change that was massive devastation in that part of Africa, the lower end of Africa, the South. So people in great numbers massed to Northern Africa because of the Great Lakes. The big, really big Great Lakes in Africa are found up there by Tanzania and in that area. And that's where the Nile begins that runs to the Mediterranean Sea. And you all have heard of the Nile, the River Nile, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later. But Adam's calendar is probably the most significant discovery that we'll talk about for Southern Africa because the Southern Africans, they built Adam's calendar circle, the calendar that tracked the stars. They built it about 75,000 years ago. They brought that knowledge to Northern Africa when they went through the mass migration. And of course, the Adam's calendar circle, they were studying the Orion constellation of stars and they were studying the Canis Major uh, constellation of stars. But what's key that I haven't talked about before regarding Adam's calendar is that they were studying the triad of stars, triads of stars, stars that form triangles in the sky, in the heavens, triad of stars. That too you can research. Now, why is that important? It's important because these triad of stars inspired the Africans to invent the triangle, believe it or not, the triangle. So the triangle was actually invented long before ancient Kush or ancient Kemet. We don't have an exact date because the records don't give an exact date, but it seems like the triangle may have been invented at least 8,000 BC, at least 8,000 BC. But again, we don't have any proof. We're going to go by the crystal instance burner that we're going to talk about shortly. But yes, the Africans studying the stars and the triad of stars led them to inventing the triangle. We're going to talk about that because it's very key that they saw the triangulation of the stars in the sky and use those triads to invent mathematics, at least areas of mathematics, in this case, geometry. Now, what is really intriguing about this for me personally is that my research has shown that the triangle, the triangle has the strongest angles of all angles in nature and the universe. The triangle. So the triad of stars based in gravity, I'm not going to get into that now. We're going to save that for another conversation. The triad of stars, they're aligned the way they're aligned because of the magnetic field and the gravitational fields of those stars in relation to one another. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the crystal instance burner. But just keep that in mind as we go along. So the triangle has the strongest angles at their axis than any other angle in all of nature and the universe. Why is that important, people? In all of chemistry, in all of physics, in all of astronomy, including astrophysics, this is why the Africans built the pyramids with the angles of a triangle. You know why? They're building it to last forever because they must have known. Come on, tell me, people. They must have known that the triangles have the strongest angles of any mathematical form in the universe. All signs have proven that, people. All signs have proven that. So the pyramids were built to last for an eternity. Now, see the Rhine papyrus. Take a break, Google, look at the Rhine papyrus, look at the Berlin papyrus. They were made at least 2,000 years before the Bible was written. At least 2,000 years, the Rhine papyrus and the Berlin papyrus were made before the Bible. 2,000 years before the ancient Greeks got involved into mathematics. 2,000 years. That's a long time, people. That's a very long time. So, yes, these triangles were invented by the Africans just from being involved in the study of the stars. And oh, by the way, everything they did was supposed to last for an eternity. Everything they invented was supposed to last for an eternity. So while you're looking at that, the quintessential meaning of all of this, the triangle, is a triad of gods. So even the triangle have led them to think about the triad of God. Triad of gods mean it's a family, like Usur and Ist and Heru. Those were the first dynasties long before ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet or Kush people. I'm talking about thousands of years before that. So all these concepts during the migration went north to Kush and to Egypt. Sacred, divine spirituality and God worship. And that too, the way they set it up in the pyramid texts, in the Book of the Dead and the coffin text, those two are meant to last forever. Sacred, divine spirituality and God worship. So you see, the Africans also discovered that this circle was the next strongest angle in all of nature and the universe. How do we know they know that? Just as how they figured out the triangle and use it to invent the pyramids, and even some of the obelisks have triangular angles to them. How did they know? And what is the proof that they knew or must have known that the circle has the next strongest in the entire universe and in nature? This is why. At the circumference, this is why. They discovered and invented the area of a circle, which is pi. The area of a circle, pi. And how did they do that? They did that by studying how many revolutions based on the royal leg and the royal cubit that they also created as part of the pyramid to form the circle. So the mathematical formulas derived from the areas or the circumference of a circle. That's what led them to discover also the metrics. Well, the French called it metrics, but it existed. The calculation existed thousands of years before the French called it metrics and algebra. Also percentages and even decimals. So you see, the cradle of astronomy have led these people, I think, very naturally to create even 3D calculations. How did they create 3D calculations? They were able to, those thousands of years ago, they were able to fit, they were able to fit in a cube, they were able to fit a circle, and vice versa. They could fit a cube in a circle, and they could tell the ratio and the percentages in the calculations. Yes, they were doing this for thousands of years, even before ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt and Kush, thousands of years. So they also discovered the ratio. So what you all will know is that ratio is the foundation of all mathematics. Ratio is the foundation of all of chemistry. Ratio is the foundation of all of physics. So These people were delving into all these things long before ancient Kush and ancient Kemet. So the migration of the Africans from Southern Africa, East Africa, West Africa, they brought all this knowledge up north and they formed the Tesseti Empire. The Tesseti Empire was formed probably around 8 to 10,000 years ago, but we're not sure. We have no artifacts, we have no records to show exactly when it was formed. But this is what we know from chemical testing and biochemical testing. Scientists have been able to determine that Naphtha, which was part of Kaseti, Naphtha is the Naphtha calendar circle is exactly like Adam's calendar circle, exactly like it. And keep in mind again, Adam's calendar circle is 75,000 years ago. Naphtha calendar circle was about just 10,000 years ago. That's what biochemical testing have shown. So why is this important? It's important again for the reason that we just talked about. The people from the south, they traveled north with their knowledge and with their know-how, and that is the knowledge that they used to build the pyramids, the Great Sphinx, and all the hundreds of obelisks that they have built. But there's a whole lot more to that, but we're not going to get into that just now. We're going to talk about Cusco, and I think we're going to have about maybe 13 minutes left. So we're not going to get to cover all the things that we want to cover, but I think you get the idea about what the migration did in terms of the knowledge that they brought to the north. So these monuments now, these monuments, the pyramid, the temples, the obelisk, they were made in honor of the supreme God. They were made in honor of the supreme God. They are religious, spiritual edifices. They are religious monuments. They were not made for fun. They were made to honor God up there in heaven, among the constellation that they study, where they believe the afterlife resides. So the triad or a triangle of God and the pyramids, that's what those are all about. So Usur and Es and Heru is one of the last triad, if not the last triad of gods, meaning that these were humans. Usur was a human, or Isis was a human, Heru or Horus was a human. That's how they created the triads of gods that led to the dynasties that we know now in Kush and Egypt. Hope that makes sense. I said a whole lot, but now we're going to dedicate the next 10 or so minutes to Cusco. Let's talk about Cusco. Yes, we're going to come back to this in future episode, but what is the Cusco incense burner teaching us, teaching the world? And since historians and scholars have known about it for at least 50 years, why is it not all over the history books? So let's talk about that. So the coastal is incense burner is the ultimate confirmation of the fact that ancient Egypt was created or invented by the Kushites, by the Tessetians. The Tessetians became the Kushites. So the incense burner is a consecrated, and that's why we should believe what's written on it. It is a consecrated spiritual instrument used in temples and religious ceremonies of all kinds. used also for medicinal purposes, and used also for embalming and the mummification of the dead. And those of you who know a little about African history, Kushite history, Kemite history, you all know that the dead is sacred to these people. So whatever they wrote, whatever they drew or draw or illustrated on the crystal incense burner has to be taken as fact. So the incense burner gives the world an ultimate proof of the monumental Kushite and Hasidic culture that built ancient Egypt. So those of you who are looking at it, the crystal burner, the crystal incense burner, we're going to talk about it now. Yes, it is the African culture that built ancient Kemet. Now you're looking at the crystal burner. Let's talk about it. God worship on it is indicated that it's been taking place for thousands of years, and we're going to get back to that. Sacred divine spirituality on it indicated that it existed thousands of years before the Bible. It has the pictograph on it indicating the sacred Medinata language. And by the way, the crystal incense burner, it's been dated to at least 4000 BC, but some scholars and scientists believe that it could even be older than that. It could even be closer to 5 or even 6000 BC, which would make it several, at least several thousand years or several generations before ancient Egypt and ancient Kush. That's when that land was called Set. So the incense burner was discovered by two archaeologists, Bruce Williams and Keith Steele of the Oriental Institute at Chicago University. You can research it as well, here in the United States. And it was discovered to be from the Nubian or Kushite A group rulers in Africa at Cusco, and it was discovered in 1963. So scholars and scientists have had since then, 1963 up to now, to put this in the history books, and they have not. So it was discovered in a Nubian cemetery, and they labeled the tomb L24. L24. So Williams and Steele wrote this, especially Williams, because Keith Steele died not too long after. But this is what they wrote. And I'm paraphrasing using my own notes. But it's there on the incense burner if you're looking at it. This is what they wrote. The incense burner is distinctively Nubian in form, carved in the distinct technique of Nubian rock art. It is decorated on the rim with typical Nubian designs. It was found in the tomb of a Nubian ruler at Cusco, Teseti. Note that Teseti, again, became Nubia and Kush. So please forgive me for keep repeating it because it's important for you to have the context. So the fifth, the incense burner has or incorporates images associated with the pharaohs, later adopted and depicted in ancient Egypt. The incense burner has or incorporates images associated with the pharaohs later adopted and depicted in ancient Egypt. Keep in mind that there was no Egypt at this time when the crystal burner was made. Egypt did not exist. Kush did not exist. Taseti, based in history, recorded history, is the only known existing kingdom or empire at the time. But Williams went on to say, but the pharaohs first appeared in Nubia, or Kush. The pharaohs first appeared in Nubia, or Kush. All right, folks? So the burner also shows a procession of sacred boats, clearly indicating sacred divine spirituality in Cusco. And then there's a white crown that you can see as well, clearly indicating royalty that is today called Egypt. There's so much in here. I probably should just pause here because there's so much in what I just said. Keep in mind that when you read the history books or articles that are written in magazine, newspapers, or online, the white crown is called Egyptian. But the first evidence of the white crown being used by a ruler was not there. So if this is not proof that, like a lot of people have been saying, that Egypt, ancient Egypt, was not created by the Scythians or the Kushites, what more proof does anyone need? And just so you all know, there's a lot of controversy about this because some scholars and some scientists and some historians, they have written and they haven't changed it since Williams wrote up what I just read you, that it was all this was Egyptian. And by the way, when a lot of scholars and a lot of scientists and a lot of historians, when they say Egypt, you all know what they mean. They mean it's Asiatic. It means that the culture there was was Asian, and there's just so much confusion online that you all need to cut through, and that's why you need to read documents. You really need to read these documents. The Crystal Incense Burner, the Pyramid Text, the Book of the Dead, the Coffin Text, the Papyrus, or Papyri, just mentioned, the Rind and the Berlin. You should read them. The Luhan, you should read them, folks, because you really need the facts. If you want to know the truth, you have to read them yourselves. I don't want you to believe anything I just said. Please don't believe anything I just said. Just go read them yourselves and put them in the place where they belong. All these facts. So the burner also shows the falcon deity, who is Heru, who is renamed Horus, and it shows a palace. It shows a Pusad, and a Serik, and a Rosette, and a palace. So, folks, let's say 4,000 BC, a thousand years before ancient Egypt and Kush. Let's say 4,000 BC. There is no known palace or palatial buildings existing anywhere else on planet Earth. That's why history is so important. Nowhere on Earth, any buildings existed up to this time. And here it is carved on a religious emblem, a consecrated emblem, a spiritual emblem. That's what the crystal incense burner is. So again, I prepared to talk to you today, and I haven't gotten through not even the third of what I prepared, but it tells you that we have a lot of information to go through, and we're going to pick it up next week. But the point here I want to drive home with you is that the migration, the massive migration from Southern Africa, from West Africa, from East Africa to North Africa, these people carry this knowledge with them, and all this knowledge existed with them, and they took it to North Africa. So next week, when we come back, we are going to talk more about coastal because I have not yet touched, as they say, the tip of the iceberg with coastal. So see you next week.